how you might it to make it fit for purpose in your context. Okay. And you know, I can't, because some journals in nutrition also prepare the experimental biological type research that we do that might be just a lot of lab analysis. So that's why they tend to talk about the materials as well. But in your case, your equipment, you know, what kind of weighing scales to use. Because what the person needs to know when they're reading that is how accurate were those weighing scales when you weighed those people? Were they calibrated? Were they checked? Really important things, because actually, where can things go wrong when we weigh and measure things? When we weigh and measure people, we get it wrong. And I think Steve's going to talk about it in the conference about, you know, how we need to train people properly. I've been out with nutritionists around the world and they cut corners. They don't ask people to stand correctly when they're trying to do the height. Even 2 or 3 inches can make a difference. That person's either obese, overweight, underweight. If you're not weighing and measuring properly, how do you know? So it's really important you show. If you're using field researchers, did you stop and train them first? We did a paper in 2020, I think we published it, where we did a project in Kumasi with Reggie. And Reggie Annan, you know, we spent 2 days in Kumasi. We took a plane ride from Accra on this tiny little plane, scared to bits. Yeah. But anyway, we did it. We got there. We spent 2 days with the research assistants, training them on how we wanted them to collect the data, going through the questionnaire. Don't undermine quality by just having one person misinterpreting your questions and asking it incorrectly. We were looking at postmenopausal women. We needed to think about how do we define postmenopausal women in Ghana when people don't even know they're in that menopause. Okay, so you have to make sure that your measure is correct. And all of those things come out in the paper. And if you've compromised on any of that, yes, you can put it as a limitation, but we don't want a whole big, long list of limitations because that quality of the research isn't so strong. They still sometimes get published if what you've got to say is new knowledge, and it's important still to share it. So there's a bit of a balance here. It really comes back to what you're trying to share. Then you've got the results. Okay, describe them appropriately, accurately, make sure they're labeled well in accordance with the journal format. Okay, simple things like that are really important. If the journal article is telling you to put them as attachments, not in the document, don't put them in the document. It's to do with the way they process your paper. And what sometimes people do is they've been rejected from one journal and they haven't checked. And they've ended up putting the paper into the next journal without following the guidelines. The guidelines of the journal are really important. And then in the discussion, don't over egg your findings. Yeah. State them clearly. What do they show? How is this relevant to the broader knowledge in this area? What is the impact of your work? All right. No need to say, oh, and this will, you know, solve the school feeding problem for the African continent, when your research study has just been on a small number of schools in your area. If it's going to inform policy and practice, who is it informing? What are they going to do with that knowledge? Think about it through to its logic. Don't just write those things that we write in our dissertations because we come to the end and we've run out of energy. Really think about that, because they are the other things that we read and are really important. And then obviously the authors and the conflicts of interest statement, all very important. The co-authorship. All co-authors should have at least read the final document before you actually submit the article, and make sure your references are in the correct format. So references are, you know, Harvard style, the number style, Helvetica style, not Helvetica, I can't remember what it's called now anyway, but there's the different styles. Check the journal style, do it accordingly. Don't be lazy. We know when you've submitted the paper somewhere else, because we're asking you to number your references, and you've actually done author and year. That's when we know you haven't had the courtesy to read our author instructions and you've just stuck your piece of work in, because that's what you did for your dissertation. Okay, so all of these things, I'm telling you, not to tell you off, but to get you to think before you do something, so you prevent yourself from rejection. Nobody wants to be rejected. As I said, we've all have been rejected, but we've learned. Yeah, and that's the key. So there are lots of things you can think about before you submit. There are submission guidelines. So again, they give you hints and tips follow these instructions. They're not just written for the sake of writing. I know it takes a bit longer, but spend that hour just reading through the website, checking you've got all your ducks in a row, as they say in the UK, before you're ready to submit. Yeah, so that's the formatting, the understanding the costs and the funding, make sure your manuscript is accurate and readable, and understand the copyright agreements, because copyright is also handed over, although you as author retain copyright, okay? And target your paper accordingly, okay? So plan for the paper. Well, now we're ready to start planning our first paper. I can see not many of you have brought anything to write on, so I'm not going to make you write. Although it is a workshop and I am surprised, but there you go. How do you plan it? Well, I use a mind map at first. I'm trying to get my head around what my paper is going to be doing, how it's going to be instructed. Can we minimize the in and out, please? Because it's distracting. Okay. Yeah. So we focus that. Yeah. I like mind maps because they help us. You might daydream while you're doing it. You might not get your right focus. You put it down, you go back to it. A mind map is useful. And I was looking on the internet about mind maps. Look, research paper, somebody's writing a mind map of what how their paper is going to be constructed, because you can't just dive in there. You've got to have a plan. Yeah, because we know when we follow a plan, we're likely to get out the other side. So have a plan where it looks like that. Yeah, look here, credit where credit is due. That's your acknowledgement. Further reading on this topic. What's going to go in there? Yeah. How will I gather the data? How will I analyze it? Or how did I gather the data? How did I analyze it? Been very clear. So have a map. This is another one, a bit bigger, very similar. And again, I apologize, it's so far away, even I can't read it. But there's things there, that different types of mind maps. If you go to that website, you'll see mind maps that people have created for their papers that might stimulate your ideas. Okay. When you're writing, you go through all sorts of emotions when you're writing. Your dissertation was hard enough, but when you're writing a paper, especially when you're responsible for that first draft, all sorts of things happen. You just have to get started. The most important thing is, even if you only write 100 words a day, you're getting started. When you've got a plan, you know, you can put it down and go back to it, because you're really focusing on your writing. Like, you know, you'll read it 50 times over by the time this paper goes in, because you're not used to writing in this format, especially some of the early career. You've got your process will set you up for success. Making sure you're checking your work, your punctuation, common sense. Yeah. Really important small things, reading it over and over. But by defining the process, you start to create the conditions that get the best out of you when you're writing the paper. And that's the important thing. It is about creating the conditions. Where's your focus? You can't do it sat on a bus. Or, you know, you've got to be in a quiet space, getting on with it and being allowed to focus, even if that's for 1 hour. You put it down and go back to it the next day. Because when I start writing papers, I try to block my diary for 2 or 3 hours. Doesn't always work. Okay, busy academic life. So I have to find, at least if I have a plan, if I don't get my 3 hours and I have to stop because I have to take a call, I know where I was up to and I can go back to it. And that's the key. Okay. And sometimes we try to get it perfect and sometimes we procrastinate. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll start it tomorrow. Oh, I've got to go and see my dad this afternoon. Oh, I'll do it. Yeah. Put a date and a time in your calendar, play your diary, sit down, make that plan. Once you've got that plan, do the next date and time you're going to sit down. What am I going to work on first? Okay, and we'll come to that. But try not to get it too perfect first time. Remember, the first time is the draft. Yeah, you will redraft. Just like when you were doing your thesis, you didn't hand in the first thing you wrote. You drafted it, you checked it, your supervisor gave you comments on it, you drafted it again, you improved it. That's how the paper's going to be. So if you think that just getting through the thesis means the paper's going to come easily, it really depends on the quality of you being able to write and focus your time writing. So, and don't overdo it. You know, don't try and burn the midnight oil on this one. I think short, focused writing spells are really good. I don't think this is one that you can just sit down and say, okay, I'm going to sit down this week and I'm going to write my paper. Some people can do it like that, but it's very intense. Okay, so do what's right for you. Okay, then let's talk about writing. Because this is one of the issues that we face a lot with our African students who, you know, the way in which you're taught, technically you're very, very good, but the writing style that we have in journals and articles, as I said at the beginning, is much more critical and evaluative in its approach. And that takes some time to move away from. If you think about when you ask a question, many of you, when we ask a question, we set the context and we describe before we even get to our question. If you go to international conferences and you listen to some of the Americans, they're just straight in with the question. Yeah, it's just a different style of education that we're used to. But first and foremost, Hemingway talks about using short sentences. Don't try to say more than one thing in a sentence. If you're trying to say more than one thing, your sentence is too long. I read things sometimes and people have got 4 lines, 4 word process lines to a sentence. Yeah. If your sentence is that long, you've mixed the mind of the reader already, because it comes tumbling out of you and sometimes you forget to just slow it down. What am I trying to say? Focus on short sentences. Paragraphs, have a short first paragraph that lays out what the beginning, because when it's short and it's short sentences and it's simple, that reader is automatically engaged. It gets them to carry on reading. Okay. Vigorous English is about making it come alive. Yeah. Use the right words, select out the right words. Was it an advantage? Was it a great advantage? Yeah. Was it good value? Was it exceptional value? You're really trying to, you know, what is it you're trying to say, and use that vigorous English well. And then be positive, not negative, always trying to sort of put a glass half full spin on it rather than always just focusing on the negatives. Okay. And that again depends on what you're writing in your paper, and you can think about that. But those 4 simple rules, and Hemingway is really easy to find. You've seen lots of videos that talk about Hemingway's 4 writing rules, and it's worth watching those in your own time because they will help you think about how you put forward your writing in those sorts of, in the sort of way that the reader's going to start reading. If it's all negative and it's all focusing on that, that when the reader reads it, they're going, oh, well, you know, this isn't really a very interesting article for me. Okay. So try and focus on those things. And then writing tips. So avoid slang and jargon. Try to use, you know, positive, vigorous language, strong verbs, clear, concise writing. Tense is always a bit difficult. Past tense, present tense, yeah, etc. So check how the journal is writing and use the same approach. Quantitative tends to be very objectively written anyway. And you write about what you did, okay? And then what you found. So you change from the past to the present and the future as you go forward in your findings. So think about that. And again, they sound like really simple things, but you'd be surprised 9 out of 10 people get that bit wrong. And, you know, try to, instead of being superfluous, this is another example of simple writing. You know, our work in this area demonstrates such persons are under strict, yeah? So careful about the way in which you structure those sentences. And again, you can use readability checkers nowadays. They're free, they're on the internet. Run your paragraphs past some of those checkers to help. So we talked about being brief, first person only where A, the journal supports it, and B, it's appropriate. We very rarely use I. And even in that last sentence where they use are, it's better to use the third person. Okay, so Joan, we do sometimes say our recent work. You do find that in articles. So again, just make sure that's okay for the type of journal that you're in. Avoid phrases like, we feel we concluded, okay? From this, it can be concluded, okay? Proofread, because that is one of the major areas you fall down on. And then let's do this. There are no tricks in this test, okay? I'm just going to demonstrate the point of proofreading. I'm going to show you a sentence in a second, and I want you to read the sentence, but read it only once. And as you read it, I want you to count the number of F's in the sentence. Count them once as if you would be if you were proofreading your own work, but be honest, don't go back and count them again, or the test will be no fun. Let's see where we go with this one. Ready? Okay. You got to the end? Oh, okay. I'll give you another second. Okay, let's go. Done. Right. What did we get? Who got 1 F? 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Some people sitting on the fence. Some people didn't count. Okay, let's see. If you found 3, you're of average intelligence. Who found 3? A few people. If you found 4, you're above average. Oh, some people going, yeah, that's me. If you found 5, you could turn your nose at anybody. You can go, hey, I got it, I got it. And if you found 6, you're a genius. 1 genius. Okay, so there are 6 F's in the sentence. And when you read it, there's no catch. Most people forget that off has a F. The human brain tends to see them as V's and not F's. So well done. But to be honest, proofreading is similar, okay? Unimportant details tend to be overlooked. And that was a joke, and it was only a game. You might be a genius, but actually what you're good at is proofreading. Go and sell your services, because you are good. The people who got 3s need to come to you to help them with their proofreading. So well done. Let me just put this up as well. Have a read of this. Yeah? You all managed to read that? Okay, and that is why the proofreading becomes really important. You miss things, it's human nature. We've got used to, you know, how many times you send a WhatsApp message and it's all over the place with its spelling, but you know what, the person on the receiving end understands you. How many times has that damn WhatsApp changed the word that you wanted to write, but they still get it. The gist is there. And that's the problem. You don't sometimes see the mistakes in your own work. Put it down, print it out, put it down, go back to it the next day, look at it fresh. Yeah, do little things like that as you go along with your writing. Okay, remember, word processing may not pick these things up. People think the spell checker is going to save them. It doesn't always pick things up. Okay, so punctuation we talked about. So I want to know now if you're a good kisser. So gentlemen, are you good kissers? Oh, they're blushing now. In respect of paper writing, not anything else. Okay. Do you keep it succinct and simple? Kiss. Okay. Are you a good kisser? And also, can you streamline it? Make it really flow. Yeah? And that's what we want you to all to be, male or female. We want you to be good kissers, because that way your writing is moving in the right direction. That's what we need from all of you. And there's lots of things out there where you can develop your own style of writing further than what you've been using in your academic career so far. We all can learn from writing. Rewriting, writing. Even myself, I work with Alan Jackson, who you'll meet in this conference, and he's a fantastic writer. And I can remember the first time I pulled together a bit of a draft of a paper and sent it to him. And literally he changed it and all of this, but we were working as a team, he didn't mind. But I learned, I never sent him a paper that looked like that again. Okay, because you learn very quickly. So have a look at some of these things. I found this one, I liked this. I've added a slide there. And so when you got to write a paper and somebody wants it for Monday morning because they've suddenly decided they want to put it in to a journal, that puts us all under a lot of pressure. So I just want to talk about my tips, okay? So I write in this order. I start with the findings. They are the absolute heart of the paper. That's the new knowledge, okay? Usually when you're doing quantitative research, you've got to have the findings, the results, yeah? The results help you drive the rest of the paper, because depending on what the results are saying, the rest of the paper will write. When you write your dissertation, you write intro, method, results, discussion. But when you're writing a paper, what I found useful, start with the findings, because you've already got the findings. You've got to make sense of what those findings are, lay out those facts for those findings, because once you got that, you know where you're taking this paper, you know what the before should be, and you know what the after should be. So I always start in the middle. Then I move to the discussions and conclusion, because what is the so what? How does this fit into the broader context, the impact? Then I go into the implications. Where am I taking this to? and then I go back to the introduction. And the reason I do it in that order is you can get bogged down in putting too much in the introduction and realizing your findings don't even reflect that. Okay, so think about it in that way. That for me is a tip that I've started to put into my papers more recently. And I find whether it's a qualitative paper, a review article, or a quantitative paper, it doesn't matter what it is, start with my findings. What is it I want to say? What have I found, and what do I want to tell people? And develop the story, because it is a story. A paper is a story around that. And all the other bits then, the title, the abstract, those bits will come later, because I've pitched from the inside out my paper, and it's now telling a story. So let's go through these sections a bit more. Okay. Remember, one of the common things that we find in a paper where people get confused is they put discussion in the findings. It's literally your tables, your demographics, your results as you want to present them. Think very carefully about how many tables and what results you're presenting. Streamline those. Keep it succinct. If you can combine tables, that's fine. Make sure they're clear. Titles, legends, any abbreviations explained. Remember what they say, the tables should stand alone. If I put a slide up of a table, it should stand alone regardless of the paper I'm pulling it from. And that's when you know your work will get cited and reproduced as well. So all of these things become, if it's a qualitative data, I know you're not doing qualitative, but you might be doing thematic. It might be a review article and you decided to thematically analyze those data. So you might put those in. It can contain quotes, pictures, and other things depending on the type of article. Largely, what I found in Africa, you tend to focus on quantitative research. So that's where I focus, but I'm a mixed method researcher, so I do a lot of qualitative. So same principle, what quote is going to reflect? We've got this topic of food insecurity that all the participants are talking about. What quote am I going to use to demonstrate that in the lives of these people? Because I'm doing a phenomenological study where I'm looking at their experiences. So it just depends on the type of paper, but that's still your findings. Okay, some journals allow you to mix the discussion with the findings, but usually in the scientific ones, very rarely. Okay, so make sure that's clear. If you find, when you're going through your findings section, you're just talking objectively about those results. If you find yourself trying to explain that result, that's discussion. Okay. Tables and figures I've talked about, and all should be able to stand alone. And the ones we need to make them high resolution. So make sure you word process them, do them, if you use an Excel to draw in and then obviously transferring that across. Very simple, very clearly formatted, because the journal needs to reproduce that. You don't want problems later. Think about your use of color, because unless you can afford to pay extra, they'll be in black and white. Nowadays with online journals, you've got more options. They can present your figures in particular in color. Okay. In the old days, we used to have to pay to have our paper in color because you had to pay the extra charge. So just check all those things. Then in the discussion, you just want to summarize those findings very quickly. Okay. And then you want to show the interpretation. So did the study confirm or deny any hypothesis that you might have set out at the beginning? Did it answer, or did you find the answer for your research question, depending on whether you say it as a research question or a hypothesis? Again, it depends on what you're doing. Is there an alternative hypothesis? Can any interpretations be made? Did the results agree with any other literature? So that's where you need to be on top of your literature and draw that in. Yeah, who else has done similar works? Have they found similar or different? What makes yours still a very valuable contribution? Okay, you might find there's a paper that's done exactly what you've done, but it's in America. Context and culture is different. So you can bring that in as your argument for why your paper is special. Okay. Relate it to previous research, as I said, limitations. So some of those limitations you might have anticipated, because there's some things you can't do. Yeah, there's some things in studies that you just can't do because we're working with human beings. So there are some that we anticipate, and there are others that we weren't anticipating. And whether they then had an impact on the quality of the research and the interpretation of the findings. It's just not a whole list of interpretations. Yeah. So when students write up their dissertations, they have. Hello? they have a strengths and limits. Again. Knowledge in that space. Oh, is this for me? Oh, okay. It's very loud. Can we turn it down a bit? You just turn that. Oh, you changed the battery. Okay, thank you very much. So we then get to our discussions and conclusions. And as I said to you, same with the findings, the discussion that I mentioned earlier, that's the next bit I write. So I want to make sure it relates, this coherence in the paper. You know, sometimes students just grasp at something, but the data doesn't match it. If the data doesn't match it, don't try and say it, because that's you'll get caught out because we only have 3,000 words to read and we're very focused. We find it. Okay, so those sorts of things are really important. Because if you don't find it, the reviewer will point it out. How can you make that conclusion when you haven't got the data? Listen very carefully at this conference. See how well people present their data and whether they're actually making conclusions that they haven't put in front of you. And say, well, actually, you didn't show us the data. How do you conclude that from what you've said when you didn't show us anything that said that? That's them grasping at trying to relate it to different things, forgetting about the value of your own research. Okay, let's go. So again, you can state your major findings. You can present your arguments. I'm just doing the discussion in more detail. And then you can say something neutral. So how does that fit with the context of other studies? You might say something negative. That's where your limitations come in. And then come back to your study strengths. Yeah. People forget how challenging and difficult it is to collect data in field. Okay, trained researchers are really important. I've put in a step where you train the researchers, where you trained into a particular methodology around height and weight, and you checked this. Yeah, you had some sort of mechanism to check that. What we do is we will get Jane stand up. One person will measure, and then the next person will measure, and the third person will measure. We check that everybody gets exactly the same within a 0.1 millimeter. Because if we don't, we start again. Why are we all getting different results? How many of you do that when you're actually setting your studies up? None of you. Okay, very few people do it, because that's a step of thinking about what you're doing. You just start shoving people on weighing scales and measuring their height, and actually we're getting data that isn't robust. So we need to make sure the data is robust. And if you've done this compared to what other papers have published where they didn't do this, you can say there's a great certainty in your findings that this is a true reflection. I was involved in something when I was in Pakistan, and then they'd gone out and they'd measured and weighed people, and they were saying, oh, 96% of the population is obese. And I know this village they were talking about. And I said, 96% of the population is obese. What do we think happened? I said, what did you use to measure the height? Okay, the weighing scales might be at, give or take, a couple of kilograms, maybe even, 3 or 4 kilograms. But your height, how did you measure the women? How did you measure the men? Who measured the women? Who measured the men? In a culture where, because we're Islamic, in a culture where the men don't touch the women and the women don't touch the men men might have just shoved the woman on the scale. They're not going to go put your chin up, are they? So all that data was wasted because the measuring step was wrong. Okay, so just note to self for those things in the future. Okay, so we've said all about the discussion. Don't talk about the results fully again. Just summarize those, reiterate them at the beginning. You don't need to keep going on and on about the results. I'm shocked when I find people who then say 37% of the findings and they're introducing new results in the discussion. Don't do that. The results are in the results, okay? And anything missing. Okay. Going then from there, so you finished your paper, but almost, but not quite. You've got to go back to the introduction. Now that you know what you're saying, now you know what your findings are and what you're concluding. Isn't it really easy now to go back and write the introduction? And that's the bit, the sharp focus. It means you've not got superfluous sentences. You're not talking about things that you don't need to talk about. You're linking that introduction to the rest of your paper. And so you're not writing 4 pages, you're writing me 1. 1 good written page is all I need to set the scene for that study. And in that, you'll go on to say what the aim of your study is or your hypothesis, but that comes at the end of your introduction. So you might start with the global picture and then the local, national context, the local context, depending on what your topic is. And then you say what the aim of your research is. And because you've got those findings fresh in your head, you make that sentence so much more powerful, and that links that paper together, which then makes writing the abstract a lot easier. Okay, do you see why that method might work for you, I hope? Okay, let's flick through. There is some formulas to it. You can think about why we're having this conversation. So these are, again, tips for writing the introduction, but it's that funnel shape that I talked about. And then the other bit is this 3-part formula, which, again, I think works quite well. So why are we having this conversation? What is the problem? Why are we having this conversation? What's important? Why should I stop doing what I'm doing and read what I'm reading? Yeah, you might say, obesity costs lives. Yeah. In Ghana or in this part of Africa, yeah, diabetes is 76% of the population. Yeah. And nothing's changing that, it's increasing. So you stop making people stop and care because you're giving them a sense of why we're having that conversation. What is the gap? Describe what previous research found and what we already know. So you're saying what the current status is and what your findings are going to add to that pot. Okay. And then what you're going to do. So that's your question, your aim, or your method, something that links into that next section, which is the method. So that in a nutshell is your introduction and what you should be putting. Again, unclear purpose. There needs to be a story in your introduction that takes the reader with you. When it's unclear and confusing, it's no good. Don't put anecdotal stuff in there. When I'm out in the field, I see this. Who reports it? Yeah, you're not the only one who sees it. Other people will talk about it. Use their literature in that introduction section and write it, okay? Methods and materials we talked about. They're just general things you can find anywhere. That data collection, we talked about that. Just making sure that you're giving enough information for someone to copy is the main method for methods and material. I just want to almost finish. We're okay for time, but abstracts, okay? I said the abstract was often the worst written part of the paper and can result in rejection. Now that you've got your paper, you can sit and write an abstract because you know the story you're telling, okay? You then go and you do, there's lots of different things, and I've got some slides on it, but I'm just going to flick through them. But there's lots of different examples out there that can help you construct that abstract. It is not a lot on the intro and a lot, and then you've put very little in the findings. It should be balanced, okay? So here, 1 or 2 sentences providing a basic introduction to the field and 2 or 3 sentences that make it relevant to what you're doing in that field, okay? Then you go on, I can't read some of it. 1 sentence stating the general problem being addressed. So within the first 2, 3, 4 sentences, you've got to the crux of what you want to do. And I can remember reading some of the abstracts for this conference, and some people have put a really long intro, a very short method with very little details, one thing to say for the results, and then it concluded loads of different things which weren't even presented in the abstract. So that coherency is important, but because you've written this paper, it makes it a lot easier. And then 2 or 3 sentences, 1 sentence summarizing the main, oh, so that's your method. Then your main result, we've shown, the data shows, or 59% of African women, blah, blah, yeah? Very clear, very factual, comes from your data. Pull out again, because you've already identified that at the end of your paper, you know what to say here. And then the discussion of that, what that means, the wider context. And finally, you know, which is that broader context here in yellow, and then 2 or 3 sentences explaining the main result in between. So what they've done, and a lot of abstracts you'll find online do similar, I'll show you another one in a sec, but they'll break it down for you. That's within the word limit. 190, did it say 190 words or something like that was that abstract. It's not a very long piece of work, but each word and each sentence matters. And that is the most important part for getting you through the door, for getting your paper published. Okay, there's loads of others. This gives you a typical context. Again, what's already known, main reasons, findings, significance of your results. Okay, doesn't matter where you look. Have a look at an abstract. Look, the problem, the background is there, the design, look how short and succinct that is. They've included the setting and the participants, because this is public health nutrition, and in a public health international journal, that's important. This setting is Minneapolis, Minnesota. Okay, they're talking about food and financial insecurity, and they're looking at food assistance with breastfeeding practices. Why wouldn't that be read by someone in Africa? You will then turn it around and make it context specific. If they were talking about African women living in a different country, your research here for the cultural context is very relevant, even in Africa, in America. Okay, so you've got to find a way in which to fit it around what you need it to be. That's why these papers get put into international journals, because they're able to pitch their research in that way. You got your results, you got your conclusions, and you got your keywords. And okay, this journal, interestingly, allows you to put keywords that are also in your title. But remember, the whole point of an abstract is so people will also find your work. So in search engines, if you put breastfeeding, great. But say you put your study is on women, you can also put woman key search term, because what you're doing is you're maximizing the hits for your abstract to be found, so someone reads your paper when they're searching for a particular article. So think cleverly about the words that you're using. So here they've used food insecurity because that's a common term, even though here they've talked about food and financial insecurity, because they've realized the word food and insecurity has been separated. So put them together, and that keyword will enable anyone who's looking for something with food insecurity to find your paper. Okay, very important. That helps you. So here you got women. Here you called them first-time mothers. So it makes sense to use the word women, because otherwise you won't pick it up. You might use female, because otherwise you won't pick it up. And it's important. Less females in the abstract. So if the words are in the abstract, you can think of additional keywords that will help people find your research. You might say the country, for example. Okay. There are lots of examples. There's another one. Again, a different kind of structure, all written without any headings. Okay, follow the structure of the journal. This one's just the same things. Here's our background here. Then they go on to 2 qualitative studies. The method is here. These are the findings, 7 themes, blah, 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 blah. That's what they found. And then our findings demonstrate. Okay. Similar sort of format. You just have to look at it. You can see how they've constructed it. This is qualitative research, and qualitative research, I expect to see a little bit more in there because of the type of themes you're identifying, etc. So again, it depends on the type of research. There are lots. Here's one: fatigue in older people, the role of nutrition. Similar sort of format. Fatigue, setting the concept. This is the problem. As a result, fatigue is often overestimated in the clinical setting, blah, blah, blah. So they go on to do that. And then they've gone on to say what they're doing here. Yeah, I think this was a review article, actually. For example, they've done that by characterizing, blah, blah, blah. So this was actually a review article. Yeah. So they just go on to talk about what the key things are in their topic area, and that's what they're doing. They say these things come up. These are the pertinent arguments within that review article, okay? The key things that we want people to know, and that's how they've done it. So there's loads of them. I just spent, when I was preparing for this workshop, I just had to play around with abstracts, but they all follow a particular pattern. Yeah, they might be different in how they want subheadings or not. It might be different because of the type of research you're presenting, a review or qualitative or quantitative, but they follow the same pattern, which is the same pattern of the paper, but shorter and tighter. So I'm going to leave those and move to references. Again, make sure your references are done properly. We talked about different styles. And then we've got authorship. So authorship always comes up as a bit of an issue for students. But if your work has been supervised, then you should really have that supervisor as a co-author. I think that, you know, academia is quite funny because sometimes students think, oh, it's my thesis and I've done this. But don't forget all those many, many meetings that you had with your supervisors who helped shape it. It is important that you recognize co-authorship in the appropriate way. There's loads of it. The other thing we don't do is gift authorship. We don't just put someone on it for the sake of it. The minimum someone should be doing is getting the final copy of the paper and making sure they've read it before it goes in, and hopefully given some feedback. But we know kind of, you know, sometimes you're being told to put this author on and that author on your papers. That's a conversation for another day. Okay. But just make sure you get the authorship right. If they're not authors, there are people you can acknowledge. You can acknowledge your participants. There's a separate section if you've got funding, which you need to acknowledge, and you acknowledge the fact that you've got ethical approval as well for human studies. So there's things like that that you move towards the end of it. You can be done for scientific misconduct, because obviously now with AI techniques in particular, we're looking at scientific misconduct and we're able to spot it much more easily using AI techniques. So just be watchful of that. And you all know about plagiarism and preventing plagiarism. It's a general common story now. And so we're kind of getting into the end of our presentation, where this is everything that I would say is included in the writing process, and that drafting and redrafting might be a while before you press that submit button. Yeah. And if you get fed up and you go, oh God, I've sent this and she's got more comments, she now wants me to do something, and that's it. But if you're going to be in the publishing game, you've got to be able to last the journey. Okay. Plenty of Milo. And just remember that drafts are drafts. The drafts for you before they go. Remember, even your own work is a draft. Yeah, you're drafting it for you. You're checking it, you're revising it before you even think about sending it to your supervisor. If I have to go in and I'm trying to understand the language and what's been written, then I've got a problem, because the amount of time I have to spend on a paper like that is a whole day. I want to go in and help my students write their papers and spend an hour, a nice, enjoyable hour reading it and saying, well, you could deepen that there, or could you link in some other references? That's what I want to be saying. I don't want to be correcting your English. Okay, that's important. So you submit, okay? And then after your work is accepted, you might then think about what you do next. You probably tell your mum or your dad or your sister or your husband or your best friend. That's the first thing we all do. Oh, I've got another paper accepted. You might tell your boss. You might email them, okay? But actually getting your work out there and used is also important. So I want to finish the last 15 minutes or so just going through ways in which you can promote your work when you've got to the end of it. Some of you have done a master's thesis, some of you have done undergraduate, and you're presenting at the conference. Congratulations, that's the first step. Getting your work out there, sharing it with others. You might be disappointed that not lots of people will come and look at your post or whatever, but we're going to do an abstract booklet. And the abstract booklet means people can go away. People like me will look at those abstracts on the flight on the way home. Yeah. So you'll still get read and you'll still be somewhere in the public domain. So don't worry too much, particularly at the early career stage. The most important thing is getting it out there. But you can do lots of different things. You can put it on your CV, put it on a website, put it on your LinkedIn, put it on your WhatsApp status. Yeah, all of those things. You can think about these different types of accounts that are free to use, that you can use to promote your work, like academia. I like Google Scholar. I'm going to show you that in a second. I've got a Google Scholar account. And follow your citations. See how you're doing. It's a really, really great feeling when you're being cited. Okay? Sometimes you're being cited and your work is being slammed. You just have to get over that. It's happened to me very recently. I wasn't very happy about it, but it is. But follow those citations. And then when you've done all that, think about starting again. You've already got yourself published. Let's keep going on that journey, because we're here to develop your careers as researchers as well. So I've done that. That's one of ours. So we have a website, we have our biography, and we have space for our papers in there. So that's quite useful to do. You can see here is my ORCID ID. Anyone who wants to find me and find my papers can find me here, as well as some of my names. But here's ResearchGate. This is another type of activity. I've got 88 publications. I've got so many views, so many citations. Not bad for somebody whose career has mainly been teaching and has those pressures of a teaching career. So we get to the end of the journey, but there's different ways. So here we are, one of our papers that we did on the dietary assessment tools for ethnic minority groups in the UK, a systematic review. Okay, so the hard work pays off. Oops, how's it? Yeah. And then this is Google Scholar. So you can all create a Google Scholar account and put even your abstract on there, because you get away in that into the public domain, because you load it up. And here you can see your papers and how many people might have cited it. And what's really nice is you get these metrics. So here we go. We're increasing the interest in the papers in certain years. So I think they were the COVID years where people had a bit more time to sit at home and read papers, and actually wrote papers and cited papers. So you'll see your career develop like that. And it's quite nice. And look, these are my co-authors. You can see Francis Zota, a good friend of mine, someone I've known for a very long time, and all the different types of papers. And you can do this, you can filter this by year as well. So it's nice. It's good. It's good to see. You get what's called a H index, which is there, the number of papers you produced and the number of citations. So that score goes up, and you can see your citations. And different websites will show different numbers for citations, but essentially that's the way in which they include certain journals or don't. Okay. Promoting, here's Elsevier. Elsevier is a good publisher. They've got a really lovely video on promoting your work, getting more visibility, because we're not just doing it to show off. We're doing it, A, because the research we've done is valuable and important in the space. B, remember what we said at the beginning, for our own self-development and promotion. Okay. If your research is visible and people are using it, people will want to promote you. Okay. These also come in journals, and I do apologize for the quality, but this is Scopus. We look for Scopus journals now when we're publishing. It's one of our university requirements. It's a list of journals that are in a certain database and considered to be some of the better journals. Not easy to get into, but we are expected to publish. And our university looks at our publication record in this way, because that's all part of promotion. The lady at the beginning said, publish or perish. If you don't keep publishing and you don't keep hitting these high impact factor journals, what happens in academia is you start to struggle. You don't go very far. So that's quite important. And then you can write it up as you've done here. You can play the publishing game, get into those really good habits that I've talked about, or you can, oh, I had 300 people. I captured all that data. No one knows about it. What a shame. Yeah, it's sad really, because we're taking people's time to participate in this research. We should give it that that focus. So I just want to finish now with some habits. So I was in the summer, we had this festival of ideas that we have at the University of Chester every year. And it's really where we get people to come and talk about creativity and where the idea gems from and moves forward. And we have a guy called Giles Brandreth, who is our Chancellor of the university, a very nice gentleman. And he wrote this book, The 7 Secrets of Happiness. And the first chapter, the first secret is identifying what makes you happy. So in your career, and what makes you happy is really important. And I have to say, what makes me happy is seeing my students graduate. That's the happiest, but I get a bit weepy because I get so emotional. I think I'm worse than the mothers and parents that are in the audience, but that's just me and how I feel about my students. The second thing that makes me happy is when I get my publication out, because I know my work is going to be shared with other people. And I do believe in my work. I'm not going to sing and dance about it, but I do think that what I do contributes to the space, and I'm proud of what I've achieved in that space. So that's my second secret. And he goes on to lots of other things. And, you know, if ever you get a chance, you can download that book and read that. Because actually, I think it's very important to think why we're here in the first place. And your early career researchers, we want you to be happy and find what makes you happy on your journey. And then many of you have heard about this book by Stephen Covey, which is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I read that when I first became a leader and a manager, and I found that quite useful in terms of how it shaped and developed me as an individual. And then I started thinking, what about 7 habits of highly effective authors who publish their papers? So I'm going to hand it over to you as we finish with another VVox exercise. But I want to know, if you were to take anything away from today, what 7 things might you take away from it to actually develop yourself with? So take a moment, write it in your phone. I'm going to put a VVox up and you can share some of your answers with me. What did you take away from today's session? Write those down. I'm going to turn to that screen in a minute and just see what I've got left. So this is your 7 habits. I'm just going to literally set the VVox to start, because it doesn't start unless I set it to start. Those of you who came in halfway and haven't used VVox, this gives you a chance to get au fait with the technology. Just give me one sec while sorry. I'm going to go back to this in a second. I'm going to go to okay, so you should have this. What are your 7 habits for publication success? So reflect on what we've talked about and let's see what you come up with. If you haven't joined the VVox app, this gives you a chance to join in the VVox if you've never used it. I've been bringing this as my new idea to this conference. Everyone's got QR codes, but I've got VVox. Got 7 responses. It's a free text response, so you can write as much or as little as you want. Even if you just put one habit up, it'd be really good for you to share that with each other, because you know I can show you the answers, can't I? You can pinch each other's habits. Almost done. Longer? I've only got 11 responses. I'm going to get you to do a bit longer. Just put whatever you've got and press the submit button, and then we'll start wrapping up with our final few words. Questions as well. Need a bit longer? I'm going to keep that open. I'm going to keep that open so you can continue writing and submit whenever you want, yeah, for the next hour or so. So you'll still be able to do that. I'm just mindful of time. It's 12 o'clock and you might want to go for lunch. So I'm going to finish with the last couple of slides, if that's okay. Yeah, you happy with that? Okay, so I'm just going to finish with the last couple of slides. I'm going to share with you my 7 habits. And there they are. Start with a clear research question. That's really part of the design of the research. Pick up the pen and write regularly, because until you start writing, and these days it's word processed, I get that, but your mind map, focusing, writing regularly, all those things will help you. Be prepared, know your audience. You'll then pick your journal appropriately. Decide that journal, but also have some backups, because you might not get into the journal that you want to. You might read the scope and find that that's not actually the scope for the kind of paper that I'm writing. That's so what of your research? What have you found? What story are you telling? That's really important to know this. Actually, I would probably put that in one position, but these are not in any order. And then start writing from the inside out. Get those results that show that and work your way through in the way that I've described. But these are my habits. And then practice kissing, because we can all kiss. We all enjoy kissing. Keep it streamlined, succinct, and simple. Yeah. And I want to see that you're going to become better and better at kissing as time goes by. On that note, I think we've completed our objectives. We've discussed everything. We've gone through all of those things. I know it's been a bit content heavy, but I hope there's been enough interactivity to keep you with me. Do we have any questions? Because we have a few minutes before we finish. We'll do some questions if you like. Yes. I can't hear you. You're going to have to speak up a little bit, or I'll come down and use the mic. So.
Will this PowerPoint be available to us? No. Oh, you don't give it. Okay.
No, we don't normally give the PowerPoints out, but I hope that you'll take away some of the habits. I know some of you have taken some photos as we've gone along. I'd have to speak to the Nutrition Society, but because we repeat this, we tend not to give it out. Hopefully you'll have picked up enough tips. The simplest way these days of learning how to write a paper is to search the internet. There is so much out there. There's video clips, there's all sorts. I always go back to those videos and those websites just to check that what I'm doing is still right. Yeah, because it's a learning curve for us all. So hopefully you'll be able to use that. Any other questions about writing? Yes. Questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation. My question is on the where to publish. Like the good thing is that you need to find where to publish. How do you do that? It's like, let's say the academic whatever they publish, right? But how can we find them to publish my paper? Do I reach them before the paper itself, or I should start drafting something and I reach them? Yeah.
Okay. So publishing where to publish depends on the type of research that you're publishing and who your audience is. Okay, so if you're a practitioner, a nutritionist in the field, you might have done work that's much more relevant to other people who are working in the field. So some of the higher academic papers might not be where you want to be. What you do want to be is open access so that everybody can freely get your paper. That's key. But I would put it into something like a local or a national nutrition journal, or a nutrition, like a professional publication. So in nursing, we have Nursing Times. In Nutrition Society UK, we have Nutrition Gazette. So there must be some place that you can publish. You don't all have to do an academic paper. Academic paper would be a nice goal, so you can think about that. What I would do is a Google search, or go on to Clarivate, and you can find all the journals with nutrition in the title, or food and nutrition, dietetics. Have a look if any of those are relevant, and have a look at their aims and their scope to see if that aligns to the sorts of things that you're publishing, and then pop it in there. Okay, and try that. But it really depends on what you're trying to publish. And that's where having a mentor, or having, going back to a supervisor or someone experienced who is used to publishing might be able to help you. If you can prepare a paper, or at least an abstract that very clearly says what your research is about, you can actually share that with someone and say to the editor, would this be suitable for your journal? They'll tell you. Okay. So those are the sorts of things and it comes with time and practice. But that's why I said one of my first slides, if you remember, was to find a mentor, because we all had mentors. Don't think that these professors that are in front of you didn't have mentors, whether they'd be the supervisors or somebody else. We all had somebody who showed us how to do it, showed us the way. Yeah, they didn't do it for us, they showed us the way. Okay, so try to find yourselves a mentor that might help. And in this conference, you'll find many senior colleagues, and you might be able to have that conversation with them. And I'm happy to pick that up with you when I've got time in the conference. Okay, we've got another one yet.
Yes, so thank you for the presentation. I have two questions. The first one, I want to apologize if it deviates a little bit from the objectives.
No, that's fine.
And it's about article publishing charges.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Especially for early career. I mean,
yeah, it's very difficult.
So I wouldn't know if you have advice on how to really go about that. And then, sorry, would you like to answer?
Yeah, let me answer that one, because we did cover it. We touched on it. Article processing charges are the way in which the journals can afford to do what they do. Okay, so there has to be a charge somewhere along the lines. They largely make those article processing charges for open access. So in other words, instead of keeping the journal article just within, when you try and search for an article, you get a wall which says you've got to pay $50 or $100. They remove that wall so other people can access your work. So we tend to pay the open access fee as part of processing. Be very careful what that article processing charge is about. I gave a demonstration in one slide, perhaps you weren't here at that time. We get written to, and basically they're saying to you, you could publish with them with a small fee. They're the ones you want to avoid. They're the scams. Okay. Most good journals will have article publishing or open access fees, but they also offer a reduced fee or almost a zero fee for people from low and middle income countries. So go to that section to see what they say about their open access charges and see whether you're eligible for the discount within that. No one's going to give you a magic, a pocket full of money. Nobody has that. We in the UK also have to pay the same charges. And if we can't get it from our grants or our university, we can't publish in that journal. So it's It's a big problem. When you're here, when the Nutrition Society have their stand in the exhibition area tomorrow, go and speak to the girls on the stand about journals and publishing. They know that area, especially Cassie. She knows that area a lot more, and she might have some other solutions for you. But essentially, that charge is there, and we all pay it regardless of country. What you can aim for is a lower fee because you're based in Africa. And your second question?
Yes, the second question is about commentaries.
Sorry.
Most articles are usually,
Yeah.
original research,
Yeah.
but then there's usually the space for commentaries or briefs. So do you it should always be invited, or you can just write to the editor and say, I have this
It's not,
commentary on this
yeah,
topic?
it's not something I've commented on, but I've noticed them in the British Medical Journal because I use that quite a lot in the work that I do now. And I do notice the commentaries on the articles. Some journals allow you to comment on that article and provide particular feedback because you might dispute it. They may have used your research incorrectly. You might want to put something into the public domain that says that. So sometimes they're invited and sometimes they're not. It depends on what you think you want to say. If you've got new data to share, get it in an article. That's your most valuable thing. You want your research data in an article published in the public domain as open access, because that's what will help your career. Yeah, is that okay? But really good questions. The last time I did this talk, somebody asked me about AI techniques as well, especially around literature reviews. So they're becoming more and more common, and they can help you with constructing your paper, but be very, very careful. They're not, you know what, we've got brains. God's blessed us with brains. Let's use them. There are AI techniques that can help quicken the process, but they won't replace the power of your brain and your intelligence. So the other thing is that publishers ask you specifically to declare if you've used AI techniques in your process. And some publishers have techniques of finding out if you have. So don't try and hide behind AI and not declare it. That's what's called academic misconduct or scientific misconduct. So if you're going to use AI techniques, be very upfront. Some journals will not accept your paper if you've used AI. Okay, so bear that in mind. Okay.
Okay, Prof.
Where are you? Oh, there you are.
I'm
Sorry.
here. Okay, my name is Tamimu Yako. I wanted you to throw more light on the keywords. I'm trying to understand. Are we supposed to look at synonyms
Yes.
of?
Yeah. You can do things like that.
Okay, synonyms.
So for example, if you put Ghana in the article, you might say Ghanaian.
Okay.
Because someone might search and just say Ghanaian. I'm interested in, the Ghanaian diet, for example.
Okay.
And your paper that's got Ghana in the title and the abstract, but later on in the paper you say Ghanaian,
Okay.
might not pick it up unless it's in the keywords. So what I'm saying to you is the keywords are like 5 extra opportunities for someone to find your paper. So try and use words that are not in your abstract or your title.
Yeah. So the other one is I want to know in the discussion, how much should we discuss? How voluminous should it be? Do we have a word limit?
Well, yeah, you kind of have to find your way through that one because overall you've only got 3,000 words anyway. So we usually say about 600 to 700 for the intro. Look at the paper, look at the other articles in that journal and try and work it out. And then you'll have some tables. Not everything will be presented. Pick out your results. You don't need to present everything. You need to summarize those tables. And then that should leave you for some space to discuss those findings. So don't be too verbose. The slide that I showed about, say something positive, then go to negative, then, come back to positives. That sandwich approach might help you with placing the context of your findings. You don't need, it's not like when you're doing your dissertation, you go on and on and on about it and you're trying to search for things, and very, very clear because your results are so focused now. What is it you need to say about those results?
Okay.
Yeah, that's the key really. What is it I need to, the take home messages from what I've shown them? What are my results saying? Are they saying that yes, the hypothesis is the right one, or we've rejected it or accepted it? Yeah, do you see what I mean? So it's linked to what you're presenting. Is it saying that we need to do more of these sorts of feeding programs? Is it saying that actually these feeding programs have only actually given me a 2% increase in body weight of children. So the stunting, or there's only had a 0.5% decrease in stunting when other people have reported 5%. So why is yours so low compared to theirs? So it's that critical discussion and engagement. Be critically evaluative. Okay.
Okay.
So we're being honest about our findings. We're being clear about the strengths. We're also being honest about what are the challenges of those findings and the interpretation before we come back to those strengths of the study. Yeah.
Prof, this is my final question.
It's okay. We have time. Nobody's
So
rushing.
I realized that under the Prospero,
Yes.
if you are working on
Registry.
a systematic review and you want to submit your protocol to Prospero, assume you submit your protocol and they give you the unique number. At the end of the day, you are not able to publish the systematic review. Are they going to cancel the unique number they've given to the protocol?
I'm not too sure about that because
Okay,
we've always
because I
published
remember I
it.
submitted my protocol, but I've not really had the time to work. But they gave me a unique number, but I've not been able to, publish my systematic review.
No,
as
that
of yet,
shouldn't be
so I'm not-
happening. That
okay.
shouldn't be happening because your protocol is just the recipe. It's not the findings. Your findings are in the systematic review and your story and your implications of discussion. Steve Wootton is here at the conference. Try and catch him tomorrow. He's got a lot of experience of systematic reviews being published and works for, with the NIHR and the Prospero system. But it's like producing a standard operating procedure or a lab manual. Those things get published, don't they? The lab procedures get published. Your protocol is just the procedure. It's not the findings. So there must be something that you're not pushing in your paper that's making it clear what your findings are. Yes, there will be similarities, inclusion criteria, etc. But actually, even from Prospero being submitted, you might include more search terms. You might have changed it a little bit. So there shouldn't be any barrier from doing a Prospero and then moving into publishing your paper. I'd be very surprised at that. There must be something else that we're not quite addressing. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, of course.
Yeah, Prof, thanks so much for your time. I just realized in your ending remarks, come again. Amin, my name is Amin.
Nice to meet you.
This thing about the impact factor, right? As a beginner or a starter, you want to go into the publication of papers. Do you really need to have that at the back of your mind, considering whether one has a higher impact factor or a lower impact factor?
No. As you work through your career, it will matter. It depends on the metrics of your organization or the in-country. So in my university, they look at Scopus indexed journals. So there's an index, has a list of the journals that are featuring where the high quality research is being produced. At the lower end, early career stage, your journal should at least have an impact factor, even if it's 0.25. Yeah, it helps. It means it's starting to grow in terms of its quality and the way in which it's cited. What you want is the visibility of your research. So the impact factor helps there. But yeah, you can go for a non-impact factor. Make sure it's a peer-reviewed journal, even if it's a 0 impact factor or it's a new journal. The African Nutrition Journal will be a 0 impact factor until the first time the statistics are drawn from it. Doesn't mean you shouldn't publish in it. It's a good start, but it's peer reviewed, it's set up properly. It's a bona fide, really good journal to be starting to put into, and it'll grow in reputation as time goes by. So the impact isn't massively important. I mention it because it can make a difference, especially if your research is from funded projects, international funding, or a scholarship program where there's an expectation you're going to have some high quality research. Try and get it in to the best quality journal for the work that you've got. And that's why I always say, what is it you're starting off to say? What is the so what of your research and who's going to want to read it? So you bear all of these things in mind, not just the impact factor. Okay. For some of because we used to do this workshop for early and mid-career researchers. So for mid-career researchers, it starts to become more important. Okay. But the most important thing is how many people have read it, how many people have cited it. If you go into something like Taylor and Francis journal, you'll see these little circles called alt metrics, which show you the metrics of how many people have downloaded your paper and read it. Yeah, ResearchGate shows you the same thing. How many views your paper has, a bit like LinkedIn. How many views you posted something, how many views did it get? That's all about the visibility of your research. And that's what it ultimately is about. It's not about you as an individual, that goes hand in hand. Yeah, but it's about the visibility of your research, so other people are using it. Any other questions, or should we start to close? I'm going to be around anyway for the rest of the week. So come and see me, come and chat. Make sure you go to the Nutrition Society stand. I just wanted to thank the Nutrition Society because they funded for me to come and do this workshop, and they continue to support capacity development on the continent, which I'm really pleased about. And particularly Cassie will be at the stall, Jade will be at the stall, and Mark is the CEO of the society, and he's around all week. So do stop and say hello to him and tell him you came to this workshop. They'll be really pleased to hear from you. I didn't do all this myself. I've learned from others, as you will go on to learn from others and hopefully share what you've learned as you go forward. I know some of you have taken photos as you've gone along of the slides. That's great. And people who developed it. I want to finish with my last bit of technology, QR code. Take it with you, scan it and fill in the questionnaire for me. It's just an evaluation of the workshop, about your experiences. And, you know, we're all learning and I want to learn. So give me your feedback. And I'd be really grateful to receive that. Be honest. I will use that to help me develop. And I hope that you've enjoyed it. Very attending.